Good morning. I hope you can all see me clearly, and the sound is coming through nice and clearly for you all. My name is Jerry Walters, and I'm the Managing Director of the firm FCS Compliance Limited. Very welcome to you in what are obviously very unusual times, not just obviously for COVID-19, but it's actually the sun is shining here in Cardiff, which is rather an unusual sight. But I hope you're all keeping safe and well, I say, in these rather unusual times. The webinar this morning is going to cover the 5th EU Anti Money-Laundering Directive and how that's principally affected people in the art market or the art sector. It's very difficult in 30 minutes to give you a hugely detailed explanation of every aspect and point of the regulations. But what I will aim to do in the next, say, 20-25 minutes, half an hour, is just give you an overview of the main regulations and how they impact you in the art market. Now, we're obviously going through very unusual times with COVID-19, and effectively, what I'm going to run you through is a PowerPoint presentation, short PowerPoint presentation of the main areas as things would normally happen, should we say, in the perfect world. And then one of the slides will take you through what is kind of expected of you with the restrictions and limitations placed upon you in terms of customer due diligence, specifically with identification and proof of address and all that aspect of the CDD process. As we go through the webinar, I'll gladly take any questions, so fire them through to you. I will allow, or I have allowed enough time at the end for the asking of any questions as well. So if you'd rather wait until the end, till I finish the PowerPoint presentation, I'm more than happy to take those questions. And also I'll put up my contact details that if you want to email anything through to me after the webinar, then by all means do, and I can answer any queries that you may have. Okay, so who are FCS Compliance? I'll just tell you very briefly. The company's been going since 2017. It was principally set up by myself. We are now a company of 8 people, 4 full-time, 4 part-time. And we're all dragged from a law enforcement background, from dealing with serious and complex fraud, money laundering, anti-corruption, working for the City of London Police, the Metropolitan Police, Thames Valley Police, Hertfordshire Police, and National Crime Agency. So a real mixture of individuals, all say from that law enforcement background. We are now a member of, obviously, part of a Lonres business as well, as of July last year. I'm just going to screen share with you the PowerPoint presentation. I'll just give you an overview of effectively the services that we provide. So you should all see that. So effectively, we do everything across the world of AML, from compliance health checks, policy procedures, risk assessments. We do customer due diligence for certain clients. And as you see on the right-hand side of the screen here, if I just use we liaise quite closely with HMRC, as you can see on the right here, because we have a pretty good working relationship with them. We assist people in the regulated sector to file suspicious activity reports, and say we all come from a law enforcement background, so we're very well versed in what is required for people who have to file reports with the National Crime Agency. And for certainly within the prime resi London market, housing market, as you can see the middle 3 rows here, or the middle 3 entities, we do customer due diligence for UK companies, overseas trusts, and UK individuals as well. And primarily we provide training down the left-hand side. So the reason I'm showing you that is to show that we do everything across the whole of the AML remit, in terms of right from onboarding a client right going through. So let's talk you through the regulations then and how they've impacted on people in the art market. And I'll just give you a brief overview and just a refresher effectively. So in 10th of January, on the 10th of January 2020, people within yourselves in the art market were brought within the 2017 money laundering regulations. Those regulations came in on the 26th of June 2017, and they've been in place now for just under 3 years and have applied to all entities within the regulated sector. So banks, building societies, solicitors, estate agents, casinos, tax advisors, etc., etc. So anyone that's captured within the money laundering regulations 2017. And as you know, on the 10th of January, as well as letting agents, it also affected people who were dealing within art. And it applied to people who were either one person selling at an art fair or had their own gallery. But effectively, if you are dealing with pieces of art that are worth 10,000 euros or more, that dragged you, I'm afraid, or unfortunately, into the money laundering regulations 2017. By current standards, so it's 10,000 euros because this is European legislation. It came in through the 5th EU Anti Money-Laundering Directive. And we've now transposed that, to say, on the 10th of January into our own domestic legislation. The current figure, and you were pleased to know, as of today, is approximately £8,700 that you're looking at in terms of a figure that brings you within this piece of legislation. So what are the actual specific works of art that you need to be dealing with to see whether you are covered by this piece of legislation? Now, you've got there a list of the paintings, drawings, limited edition. I won't read you through the list, but those are generally the defined list of art that will, say, ensure that you are covered by the money laundering regulations 2017. Now, obviously, rather contentiously, it's left off antiques. As you can see towards the bottom there, it does also exclude jewellery. Why that was done, I have no reason. I no knowledge why they chose that, or the HM Treasury chose to come up with this list, but obviously it was with consultation with people within the art sector. So the areas that it's covered. Now, in terms of your supervision, as you know, you are supervised by HMRC, who also cover the property market, which is where the most of the clients of FCS Compliance come in. So moving on to the next slide. The money laundering regulations came in 2017, the 26th of June, and you can see in the brackets there towards the top, you've got the Amendment Act 2019, effectively, which is when the legislation changed or was tweaked slightly. The regulations quite lengthy, and they set out everything to do with anti-money laundering or the prevention of anti-money laundering. Now, I've highlighted for you here the main regulations that will impact on you. As you can see, the top two here, reliance, which is regulation 39, that covers a regulated entity placing reliance upon the CDD, Customer Due Diligence, or KYC. That's been undertaken by another regulated entity, but I'm not going to cover that this morning. Next to that, you've got politically exposed persons. So forming a business relationship with a politically exposed person, that would potentially be deemed as higher risk in terms of exposure to money laundering. So you have politicians, people who have held a prominent position within a political party, also people in the military and the judicial get covered by this area. And again, I'm not going to go into any detail on these this morning because it's quite a lengthy subject in itself. What I am going to focus on are the three right across the middle here, which is the training, policies and procedures and risk assessment aspect. And this one in the top right-hand corner here, which is undertaking effective customer due diligence. I will also touch on the end, right at the end here, the bottom one, record keeping, just to inform you how long you need to retain records and how you retain them going forward. So if we look at the main features of the regulations, the three across the middle here, which I'm going to touch on to begin with, when you are, as you say, you are supervised by HMRC, when HMRC want to seek that a regulated entity is complying with the regulations, they are interested under these three across the middle here. These are the three that you need to have in place or to have undertaken to comply fully with the money laundering regulations, bolted on to then the customer due diligence aspect. When HMRC will, they have two methods of supervising people under their remit. So real estate professional, money service bureaus, and now yourselves. They can either write to an entity asking them to confirm to them they are complying with the regulations and ask them to supply certain documentation to them for them to confirm that. That's under Regulation 46, the money laundering regulations. Or the second aspect is that they can sometimes write to regulated entities saying that they are coming to undertake an actual inspection or a visit. Now, obviously, under the current climate, that is not going to be likely. However, once this COVID-19 has started to ease, I've no doubt that HMRC will then begin stepping up the process of writing to people again just to confirm that they are compliant. Only last week they wrote or sent a circular, certainly to the property profession, informing them that they remind them of their responsibilities when it comes to AML. Because one of the things that we have seen, without a doubt, in the last 3 or 4 weeks since this pandemic is encountered, is an increase in fraudulent schemes and people seeking other ways to fraudulently obtain money through investment frauds to do with PPE, or it might be vaccines, whatever it might be. But they've very inventively come up with various methods to fraudulent schemes to generate funds that then have to be laundered. So they've, in the current climate as well, you would say that people who are subject to the money laundering regulations, they will prey upon the fact that it's proving slightly more problematic, should we say, to undertake customer due diligence in this present climate. So let's start with the training. How often should you be training staff? Well, first of all staff should receive some anti-money laundering training, and it needs to be of a certain standard. A log needs to be kept that people have received some training, identifying the main areas, for instance, what is money laundering, what are the red flags, what are the risks around your industry, and keeping up with current trends and typologies, and also looking at the legislation, the money laundering regulations and the Process of Crime Act. So let's look at, first of all, Regulation 19 to 21, which is policies, controls and procedures. Every regulated entity or every firm within the regulated sector should have written anti-money laundering policies and procedures in place. And these need to be pretty comprehensive. It's no good just putting something on the back of 2 pages of an A4 page. You need to have a document that quite clearly sets out what it is you do in order to prevent or protect your business from being concerned with money laundering. You'll see these are the main areas that you will seek to cover in a document like that: policy statement, procedures, what is money laundering, the legislation, recognition of red flags, record keeping, how do you, customer due diligence, when do you undertake CDD, how do you undertake it, and the risks around that. Training aspect, obviously, I've touched on. And then quite crucially here, dealing with politically exposed persons, and that is very much, very topical and is very much part of the current political climate with anti-corruption measures. Certainly we've seen that with high value goods in the housing market in London has come under a fair amount of criticism in the last 2 or 3 years. It's been clear that a lot of real estate within central London has certainly been obtained with corrupt money or corrupt individuals from overseas. Financial sanctions, and then in this middle one here on the right-hand side, you will see suspicious activity reporting and liaison with the National Crime Agency. So that's effectively covering an area of, if you need to make a suspicious activity report to the National Crime Agency, how you go about it, what you can expect in liaison with them. So that's your policies, controls and procedure document, and it needs to be quite comprehensively set out. The second document, in line with Regulation 18, is probably the most, or slightly more problematic. It requires all firms covered by the regulations to undertake a firm-wide risk assessment. So the written assessment should include your customers, countries, geographic areas, products or services, transactions, and delivery channels. And what I was looking, if you look at point 1, you would be covering in a document like this, things like where are your customers originating from? What sort of jurisdictions are they coming from? Are they coming from higher risk areas? And if they're coming from higher risk areas, how many of your clients are knowingly politically exposed persons? Obviously, how you might liaise with a client might be very different, say from somebody, as an example, from France, as opposed to somebody from Eastern Europe or Russia, etc., or even China. They might be slightly higher risk attached to individuals from certain geographic areas. And that brings you on to point 2 as well. That also looks at the countries and geographic areas that those people are originating or either have links to or residing from or are from. And it will look at if they are coming, or if you have clients that are from overseas, generally, where are the sums of money being transferred from, for instance? Are they coming from overseas financial institutions? And are they've got links to countries that are subject to financial sanctions, for instance? And then your products or services will determine things like the value of the property or value of the items that you're selling. We've looked at the threshold, of course, being £8,700, but if you are selling items of works of art that are well beyond that, obviously there might be the potential risk, or slightly higher risk, from a view of the value of the item might determine what risk should be assigned to it. And it also looks at when it talks about services, it will reflect on a risk assessment whether you are conducting a lot of sales online, for instance, or attending things like art fairs, or whether a lot of sales are done from a physical premises like an art gallery. Again, those sorts of factors can determine the level of risk that your business might be exposed to. The fourth area is the transactions, and it's very much overlaps the first 3, effectively dealing, as I say, with foreign individuals, where the funds are being remitted from. Are they coming from, for instance, a correspondent bank? Or do you have dealings or business relationship with overseas art dealers or entities that might heighten the risk element that you've got? And then the delivery channels, this will cover areas such as, have you appointed a money laundering reporting officer? Have all your staff received training? Do you have or do you use the services, for instance, of an online verification company to undertake online searches for you? So those are the 2 key areas, the policy and procedure and the risk assessment. And I can absolutely guarantee for you here and now that if you were unfortunate to receive communication from HMRC in the coming months, or even worst case scenario, a visit, these are the 2 critical documents that they will want to see every single time. And on a personal visit, for instance, they will write to an organisation and ask for these documents to be supplied in advance of any physical visit. And then depending on the standard of the document they receive back as to whether they then follow that up with a visit. So, customer due diligence, and this is the area that is probably the most problematic in the current climate that we're faced with in relation to the pandemic. So, you've got 3 levels of customer due diligence. You've got simplified, SDD, you've got your standard, and then your enhanced due diligence. Now, the vast majority, probably in the 90% region or area of due diligence that you undertake, will be within this area here, the standard CDD, where you're attempting to identify the individual that you're forming a business relationship with, and obviously confirming their place of residence, and sometimes confirming their source of funds if it's required. So I'm not going to look at enhanced due diligence this morning. I will refer to simplified due diligence in a second, but I'm effectively going to look at standard CDD. So under Regulation 27 to 30, you are required to undertake customer due diligence on your client prior to undertaking a business relationship or during the course of the business relationship. So what does that actually entail? What are you required to do? So for individuals, you need verification of the identity using reliable independent source documents. So the standard documents, government issued, obviously passport, driving license, firearm certificate, the usual documents that you would expect to see. And under normal circumstances, so we're talking pre-COVID-19 here, you would expect, or you would be required to get those documents certified if you're not meeting the individual in person. And the certification would be undertaken by a solicitor, accountant, somebody who obviously is subject to the money laundering regulations themselves, or you can certify the documents. And what I mean by that, so let's talk here when we eventually come out of this pandemic and things tend to gradually go back to a sort of new normal. In terms of certification documents, if I am your client and you are meeting me face to face, you would be taking a copy of that document and certifying, just writing on it the fact that it is you've taken a copy and it's a true likeness of the person that you've met, signing and dating it. So that's in the perfect world, that would how you would obtain those documents. If you're not meeting the person face to face, as I say, you'd be getting them verified then independently through lawyer, accountant, even the post office, somebody that's on the government approved list that can actually certify documents for you. Proof of a current address, and generally this should be within the last 3 months. So you'd be looking at, again, the obvious things, utility bill, council tax bill. You could rely on that. Of course, you may not get there within the last 3 months, but generally if you've got one other method of confirming or linking somebody with an address, you would get the proof of current address within the last 3 months. And again, you would take a copy of that and certify that you've taken a copy from the original. Now, the bottom one is establishing the source of funds consistent with the knowledge of the customer, the risk profile after rating. Now, the vast majority of your clients that you might be meeting at art fairs or trade fairs, you would be just taking maybe a payment up front from a bank or bank transfer there and then. And effectively, if it's coming from an approved or a regulated financial institution within, say, the UK, then effectively you can't really go beyond that. Where you've got to be more aware or more cautious, should we say, is if you are using online verification or you're doing something in place that is identifying your client as being a politically exposed person and therefore potentially higher risk, you may start or may be required to ask a few more questions as to how they are intending to fund a particular acquisition, particularly if it is a high value item, significant value over and above the threshold. So back to COVID-19 and the pandemic, what are you now actually required to do? What is actually going to happen in terms of not just yourselves within your industry, but everybody within the regulated sector? Well, what you're being asked to do with all these regulations is undertake what we call a risk-based approach. So effectively, these are the areas that you can consider to assist you in the process. You can use or consider electronic verification services. Clearly, there are a number of companies out there that will do electronic verification running through from your client uploading a selfie to confirm that the document that they're providing or producing is the person that's in that document in the passport. You can use them for effectively checking an address where you're not able to physically see a utility bill or a council tax bill. One of the things that I would refer you to, though, or give you some advice over particularly, is the electronic verification services or providers that are out there. They cannot replace completely what you are required to do. So in other words, you can't just take the name and address of somebody and put it through an electronic verification service and just go by that. You still need to have physically sight of a document or have a document sent across to you. So you're going to still need to see either a JPEG or PDF emailed across to you, a passport, driving license, because clearly you're not going to meet the person in face-to-face on a face-to-face basis. But you're not going to get these documents certified. There's a requirement, or there isn't going to be a requirement for you at the current state of play with the current climate for you to get things certified. So one of the other options that is open to you is to obviously hold a virtual call, as we're doing this morning, so a Zoom or a Skype call, where you're seeing the person face to face. Now, what you could ask them to do in this situation is hold the document that they're relying upon up to so you can clearly see the document, maybe even the details, and it is the person in the document. And then you'd get them to follow that up by actually then emailing you the PDF or the JPEG of the document as well. So you have both. And certified, I would advise you to certify that document that you've got, the JPEG PDF. It's exactly as you would certify it normally, and say that you undertook a Skype or a Zoom call on a certain date, and you confirmed that this was a true likeness of the person you saw in that call, and sign and date it effectively. So you've got it coming from both angles. If you've got electronic verification services here, of course, you can ask for the document to be sent through as a JPEG PDF. You can put it through one of these verification services, confirm the document is genuine, and again, you can follow that up with a Skype or a Zoom call, just to see the person actually physically holding the document up. Uncertified copies, I've talked about that, and also when I talk about expired documents, there's some guidance that came out this week from what we call the Financial Action Task Force, which is the global body for anti-money laundering, and they have even suggested or recommended that it might be acceptable under the current climate to take recently, and I say we use the word cautiously, recently expired documents. So probably something that has expired within the COVID-19 lockdown period of time. Generally, you would never take expired documents here as proof ID, but they've cut some sort of leeway in terms of that. And the other option to use open source. When we talk about open source, we talk about effectively the internet, Googling, whatever you want to call it, Safari, where effectively you're getting a document, particularly if your client is a high-profile individual, you're getting a copy of a document sent to you by a JPEG PDF. You're able to do a Google search because they're a high-profile individual, and it's clearly obvious that that is the person that you're dealing with as your client. So that's another option that's open to you. And wherever possible, one of the advice that is advised, effectively doing this method of CDD is effectively simplified due diligence. So if you are looking and you're able to ascertain that the business relationship you're forming is of very low risk when it comes to money laundering, you can effectively undertake the simplified due diligence process, which is why you're getting uncertified documents or accepted to get uncertified documents. So that's it during the COVID-19. That's the current advice and guidance that's come from various organizations and what I would sort of pass on to you. The critical thing is with these regulations is that you are taking a risk-based approach. So it is not black and white. You are basically looking at the overall picture of the transaction you're involved with and taking a risk-based approach to say, well, if having taken these measures in place, you're quite satisfied that the risk of money laundering is very, very low, then you can justify taking or putting these steps in place. And the final thing I wanted to touch on before we come off the presentation is in terms of the record keeping, which I touched on. Just to remind you, if you're not aware, any documents that you retain for customer due diligence, you must, for AML, you must retain them for 5 years. So that would include, for instance, a copy of my passport, my proof of address. You have to keep those documents 5 years. It doesn't matter whether it's electronically or it's in paper format, but ultimately, so you must retain them. It's not, if you're seeking to retain them beyond 5 years, you can see here it's only because of they have been required for court proceedings or an enactment, the consent of the subject, or the reasonable grounds to believe they're retained for some sort of legal proceedings. So anything, once you've got to 5 years, you must destroy them. Now, how does this fit on GDPR? Well, quite simply, the money laundering regulations override your GDPR responsibilities effectively. It's quite a powerful piece of legislation, therefore, for AML purposes, you must retain them. So just finally on that, which I saw in State Agent 2 last week, once you have documents or you've had sight of documents, personal documents, be it a passport, you've obtained a copy, and if you are then using online services to put it through a search, you don't then just retain the search and destroy the document that you've used, i.e. the identification document. You must retain that, the copy of that original documentation that you've obtained, so anything for AML purposes. So that's PowerPoint, just to give you a very, very brief overview in about 25 minutes of the money laundering regulations. Obviously, there's quite a bit more to them than that, but it's giving you an overview of where we are in terms of the pre-COVID-19 pandemic days and what you're currently faced with going forward. I'll see if there's any questions that have come in, and I'll quite happily answer any questions now. Also, you can see my contact details there. Feel free to drop me an email or drop me a line if there's anything else arising out of this webinar that you're unsure of, you want further clarification, or you just want to ask any general questions. But if there are any questions, I'll quite happily take any questions that you've got at this stage. I've got a question that's come in. I won't give you a name, but the art category is subject to money laundering regulations. That comes back to slide 2. So if I go back, I'll just share my screen again with you. Feel free to take a screenshot of this. Bear with me, and I will just... Okay, so that's in answer to your question. Those are the categories. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, or by all means, I can email you these details after this webinar. That'll give you some information as to what's required of the categories that are captured by the piece of legislation. Okay, got some other questions that have come in here. Someone said, how does the retention of personal documents affect privacy laws? Well, as I said to you, effectively you can, the responsibilities that you have under the money laundering regulations override your responsibilities in relation to GDPR. So you must keep those documents for 5 years. It doesn't matter if I was your client, I have no say in saying that you can't retain my documents. It is a simple matter of fact that in terms of money laundering regulations, you are required to retain those documents, say, for the 5 years. So it overrides GDPR. Are watches considered jewellery? I would suggest, not being an absolute expert, I would say that they probably are. So I would, unless watches are appearing within that list, I would say they should be left, or they're not captured by this piece of legislation. Does the sterling amount vary according to currency variations? Well, yes, it does. You could probably argue at the time of receiving a letter from HMRC or an email or even a visit, that you could say, well, actually a particular transaction doesn't relate to that or doesn't hit that value at that moment in time. As a guideline, I would say to you, and we've said this certainly to people who are, for instance, within the letting industry for property, who are also under the €10,000 threshold, I would say as a benchmark, what you should be working to is that everything over 8,500 would be captured by this piece of legislation, so that would allow for fluctuations. We've got somebody, does your company offer an online service for CDD, and do you offer... Yes, we do. If you want to email me after this webinar, then I can, answer that question. Okay. I've had the same question coming in for saying, but the art category subject to money laundering regulations. Not a problem. I've got your details. Yeah, by all means, I'll email you that bits of information going forward. Okay, there's another question. Please, can you show your contact details at the end? Yeah, just... Yeah, I'll put you, I've got that questions come through. I'll send you my email details by all means at the end if you need to get in touch with any more questions, anything you can follow up on. So if there's no more questions that have come in, thank you very much for listening this morning. That's just just giving you a very brief overview of the money laundering regulations under these very strange times that we find ourselves in. But as I say, you hopefully got an idea now post-COVID-19 what is required for you in terms of being compliant. And as I say, having a reasonable working relationship with HMRC and having sat on various or a number of supervisory visits they've done in the last few months, I can guarantee you need to have those documents in place going forward, and you need to consider those services. And I say post-COVID and during the COVID-19 pandemic, please try and apply the measures or the guidance that I've given you. So if there's no more questions, I will shut this webinar down. Please stay safe out there, and thank you very much for listening this morning. Thanks.